few American rock bands are as tied to a sound, a place, and a myth as Lynyrd Skynyrd. Their name instantly brings up roaring guitars, Southern identity, and songs that became permanent fixtures of classic rock radio. But their story is not just about hits like Sweet Home Alabama and Free Bird. It is also a story of long struggle, lineup changes, sudden fame, catastrophic loss, and an unusual second life that carried the band into a new generation. Lynyrd Skynyrd became known as the definitive Southern rock band because they blended blues, country, hard rock, and working-class storytelling into something that felt both regional and universal. Their music sounded like Florida highways, smoky clubs, and arena stages all at once. To understand why the band still matters, you have to begin before the fame, before the tragedy, and even before the name Lynyrd Skynyrd existed. The band's roots go back to Jacksonville, Florida, in 1964. The original group was not called Lynyrd Skynyrd at all. They first came together as My Backyard, built around singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarists Gary Rossington and Alan Collins, bassist Larry Junstrom, and drummer Bob Burns. They were teenagers trying to shape a sound out of the music around them: British rock, American blues, country, soul, and the tougher edge of garage bands. Like many young groups, they spent years playing small venues, changing names, adjusting members, and learning how to command a crowd. That period was essential because Lynyrd Skynyrd did not arrive polished. Their power came from repetition, roadwork, and the chemistry of musicians who learned to trust the push and pull of each other on stage. By 1968, the group settled on the name Lynyrd Skynyrd, a deliberately altered tribute and joke linked to a strict gym teacher, Lynyrd Skynyrd, whose name became part of rock history in distorted form. The unusual spelling made the band instantly memorable, but the name worked because the music behind it was just as distinctive. At a time when many bands were chasing psychedelic sounds or polished pop formulas, Skynyrd leaned into grit. Ronnie Van Zant's voice was plain-spoken but commanding, and the guitars did not simply accompany him, they argued, answered, and built drama. The band's identity grew around multiple guitars, direct lyrics, and a Southern perspective that did not feel manufactured. They sounded like musicians who knew exactly where they came from, even while aiming for a much bigger stage. Lynyrd Skynyrd's breakthrough came with their 1973 debut album, famously titled, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. By then, the lineup had developed into a stronger and more expanded unit. Leon Wilkeson was on bass, Billy Powell brought piano and keyboards into the band's sound, and Ed King added another guitar voice. This version of the group had the tools to create something larger than bar band rock. The debut album introduced the balance that defined them: heavy but melodic, Southern but not limited to one audience, loosened feeling but carefully arranged. The record presented Lynyrd Skynyrd as a band with both muscle and discipline. They could stretch songs into epic territory, but they could also deliver hooks that stayed in the listener's mind after one play. The song that most clearly announced their ambition was Free Bird. It began as a mournful ballad and transformed into one of rock's most famous extended guitar finales. The track became more than a song, it became a ritual. In concert, it allowed the band to show patience, control, and then release, building from emotional restraint into a massive instrumental climax. The reason Free Bird endured is not only the guitar work, though that became legendary. It also captured a feeling of restlessness, the desire to move on, the cost of attachment, and the refusal to be pinned down. For a band that would become associated with both freedom and loss, the song later took on meanings that no one could have fully predicted when it was first recorded. Sweet Home Alabama pushed Lynyrd Skynyrd to another level of fame. Released in the 1970s, it became one of the defining songs of Southern rock and one of the most recognizable guitar riffs in American music. The song's power came from its confidence, bright guitars, a relaxed groove, and a chorus built to be shouted by crowds. It also placed the band directly inside conversations about Southern identity, pride, and controversy. Whether heard as celebration, response, or cultural statement, the song made Skynyrd impossible to ignore. It gave them a signature anthem, but it also narrowed public perception. For many casual listeners, Lynyrd Skynyrd became the Sweet Home Alabama band, even though their catalog was broader, darker, and more emotionally complex than that single image suggests. Part of what made the band stand out was its changing but powerful lineup. Bob Burns left and was replaced by Artemus Pyle in 1974, giving the rhythm section a new drive. Ed King left in 1975, and Steve Gaines joined in 1976, bringing fresh guitar firepower and songwriting energy. Lynyrd Skynyrd was often described through its three-guitar attack, but that phrase can oversimplify what made the arrangement work. The guitars were not just louder in number, they created layers. One could hold rhythm, another could add melodic fills, and another could cut through with a solo. Billy Powell's piano gave the songs swing and color, while Ronnie Van Zant kept the arrangements grounded with vocal authority. The band was a machine, but it still sounded human. By the mid-1970s, Lynyrd Skynyrd had become one of America's major rock acts. They released 5 studio albums and 1 live album during their original run, building a reputation as a fierce touring band. This was the era when Southern rock was becoming a major commercial force, and Skynyrd stood at the center of it. Their music did not depend on studio polish alone, it was built to survive the stage. Audiences responded to the mix of swagger, vulnerability, and instrumental force. But the speed of their rise also came with pressure. Constant touring, internal tensions, and the demands of success surrounded them. Like many rock bands of the period, their public image suggested invincibility, while behind the scenes the pace was exhausting and dangerous. On October 20, 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd's original story was suddenly and violently interrupted. Their chartered airplane crashed, killing lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, and backup singer Cassie Gaines. Other members of the band and crew were seriously injured. The crash froze the band at the height of its power and transformed its music forever. Songs that had once sounded rebellious or celebratory now carried an unavoidable sense of mourning. Ronnie Van Zant, in particular, became a symbol of lost potential, a frontman whose voice and writing had helped define an entire genre, gone before the band could fully enter its next chapter. The disaster did not simply end a tour or a lineup. It ended the original era of Lynyrd Skynyrd. For years after the crash, Lynyrd Skynyrd existed mainly as memory, records, and legend. That changed in 1987, when the band reformed for a reunion tour. The decision carried emotional weight because no one could replace Ronnie Van Zant in a simple sense. Instead, his younger brother, Johnny Van Zant, became lead vocalist, creating a direct family connection to the original voice without pretending the past had not happened. The reunion was not just nostalgia. It tested whether the songs could live outside the tragedy that had come to define them. Fans responded because the music still carried power, and the surviving members could honor the original band while allowing the name Lynyrd Skynyrd to continue in a different form. The post-1987 version of Lynyrd Skynyrd continued to tour and record, with Johnny Van Zant fronting the band and Ricky Medlocke becoming an important presence after returning in 1996. Medlocke had first written and recorded with the band in the early 1970s, so his return helped connect later Skynyrd to its early history. Still, the band's continued existence raised a question that follows many long-running groups: what makes a band the same band after so many changes? With Lynyrd Skynyrd, the answer was never only personnel. It was also the sound, the songs, the audience, and the commitment to carrying a particular legacy forward. Even as founding members passed away over the years, the band's identity remained tied to a musical tradition larger than any single lineup. Recognition from the wider music world confirmed Lynyrd Skynyrd's importance. In 2004, Rolling Stone ranked them number 95 on its list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. In 2006, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Those honors reflected more than record sales, though the band sold more than 38 million records in the United States by 2023. They reflected influence. Skynyrd helped define the vocabulary of Southern rock, ringing guitars, direct storytelling, road-tested arrangements, and a balance between pride and pain. AllMusic called them the definitive Southern rock band, a description that has stuck because few groups shaped the genre so completely. Their songs became reference points for countless musicians trying to capture authenticity, grit, and emotional scale. In January 2018, Lynyrd Skynyrd announced what was intended to be a farewell tour, but the band continued to tour afterward. That decision reflects the complicated nature of legacy acts. Fans still want the songs, musicians still feel connected to the stage, and the boundary between farewell and continuation can become blurry. In 2023, Gary Rossington died, leaving no founding members remaining in the band. At the time, members were still working on what would have been the band's 15th album. Rossington's death marked a symbolic closing of the original circle that began in Jacksonville in 1964. Yet Lynyrd Skynyrd's story did not disappear with the last founder. It survives in recordings, concerts, influence, and the strange durability of songs that keep finding new listeners. Lynyrd Skynyrd's legacy is powerful because it contains contradiction. They were a regional band that became nationally iconic. They were a hard-rocking group whose most famous song could feel like a farewell. They became symbols of Southern pride while also carrying the weight of tragedy, debate, and loss. Their original career lasted only a few years at the top, but its impact stretched across decades. The band's music endures because it feels lived in, rough around the edges, emotionally direct, and built around performances that sound like people playing for survival as much as success. Whether heard through Free Bird, Sweet Home Alabama, or deeper album cuts, Lynyrd Skynyrd remains one of rock's most recognizable stories, a rise from backyard beginnings to legend, forever changed by disaster, but never fully silenced. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.